and also making it very clear that any form of task force, Northside Fugitive Task Force or otherwise, will not have participation from the Minneapolis Police Department if body cameras are not involved. So to make it clear, no body cameras, no MPD. We can demand accountability, we can demand transparency without compromising the necessary facets of community service that we need on a daily basis. We can fight to advance racial justice without harming our neighborhoods, regardless of the circumstances that are occurring. So I've spoken with countless neighbors from the area, with community members and business owners over the last several days that are very much on the front lines of what has been unfolding in Uptown. And we don't want conflict. We don't want to inflict additional trauma on a community that has already experienced so much. We have prioritized de-escalation every single step of the way. De-escalation has been a focus, but we also need to acknowledge that the atmosphere, especially in the last couple of days, has substantially changed. So our administration right now, we stand ready to support peaceful protests. We stand ready to demand accountability and to memorialize those who have been lost. We recognize that peaceful protest and First Amendment speech is extremely essential, not just to the healing process, but to our democratic process, and we want to make sure that it's protected. But we cannot allow the unauthorized closure of streets. We need to make sure that both residents and businesses are able to access essential city services. And at present, I have directed Public Works to be working directly with our Minneapolis Police Department to remove the makeshift barricades that have been put in place in the area of Lake and Girard. As for tonight, we will have additional law enforcement resources that are in the area from our regional partners. And what will happen is we will make clear to offer a dispersal order if anything goes beyond peaceful protest. Following the dispersal order, we will give people time to leave, and if they don't, arrests will in fact be made. So the residents and workers who call Uptown home can't simply have this city abandon them, and we need to make sure that this area is open and accessible. And I'll also note that it's dangerous. To have the street closed off with makeshift barriers, as we've seen, has been dangerous both to patrons, to residents, and also to protesters, and we have an obligation to community to make sure that people are indeed safe. So I'm asking the people of Minneapolis and the people of Uptown to join me in doing this hard work, to demand better from our law enforcement, to demand better in terms of transparency. We're not letting up the pressure a single bit right now. We are also calling for peace. And we are calling right now also to get back to a sense of normal while acknowledging that we need to make substantial shifts towards transformation. So with that, I'll pass it off to Council President Lisa Bender. After that, we'll hear from Inspector Blackwell, and then we'll open it up to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm Lisa Bender. I represent Ward 10, which includes Uptown, on the City Council, and this term I also serve as the Council President. What is happening in Uptown began with law enforcement killing Winston Smith on June 3rd, and is exacerbated by the incomplete and inconsistent information that's been coming from federal and state agencies. I want to say that the city stands with the family of Winston Smith in demanding transparency. We need answers about what happened and why from U.S. Marshals and from the state BCA, which is investigating. Like the mayor, I've been in touch with the BCA, and we are pushing for that transparent information as quickly as possible. I know that people are protesting in the streets because they want every member of our community to care about Winston Smith's life. And now, following the tragic death of Deanna Knidick 2 days ago as she protested, to care about Deanna's life. We need the BCA to provide as much clear and consistent information as possible about what happened to Winston, and we need the county attorney to provide updates about the charging decisions in front of that office against the driver who killed Deanna. The Uptown area has one of the highest concentrations of high crash roads in the city, including county arterials like Lake Street, which carry heavy traffic and are unsafe on the best day. We need to balance the right of protest with our responsibility to provide for people's safety in our streets, including those who are in the public right-of-way. Right now in Minneapolis, our system of safety relies almost entirely on police. We've made small investments in violence prevention. We have some pilot projects up and running, but they pale in comparison to MPD's budget. This situation is a perfect example of the shortcomings of relying on a police-only system of safety. Sending police as the only mechanism to support safety after law enforcement harms or kills someone puts everyone, including law enforcement, in an impossible situation. We know from last summer that use of force against protesters and journalists caused more harm, rightfully larger protests, which led to chaos. As we work together to support the community through this, we have to rely on the system that we do have. The police department reports to the mayor. He has full control over the police department under the city's charter. That's always true of every mayor. The city council is not and never has been part of the MPD chain of command. So I'll direct all the questions about the police response to the mayor. He's been in communication with myself and Councilmember Lisa Goodman, who represents parts of Uptown as well, as has the 5th Precinct Inspector, Katie Blackwell, who you will hear from next. And I want to commend her leadership in balancing all of these really difficult dynamics in the situation in Uptown. There have also been volunteers and community-based organizations out working to provide and support for safety. We're grateful for their service. On the long term, we need a better system of safety with more options. We can't rely on a police-only response to a system of safety. Thank you. So I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Council President Bender. And next, I want to invite up Inspector Blackwell, and I would acknowledge the really excellent work that she has been doing over the last several days and the great lengths that the Minneapolis Police Department has taken to de-escalate very tenuous and difficult situations.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm Katie Blackwell. I am the 5th Precinct Inspector for the Minneapolis Police Department, which covers the southwest corridor of the city. I just want to thank the mayor and the city council member, Bender, and Councilmember Goodman for working closely with us, along with the neighborhoods and the community members in the area. We have done our best in the last couple of weeks to remain patient and understanding. We're very sensitive to the people that need to heal right now and have their voices heard. I think that we take great pride in Minneapolis, allowing people to give freedom of speech and to allow them to voice their concerns and their frustrations and allow them to heal. This morning, we've seen as a different scenario the last couple of days, and with people taking over the intersections and blocking it is very unsafe. And so for us to be able to respond as police officers, firefighters, and paramedics if somebody needs assistance. So we came in there this morning as a collaborative effort with the city entities, Public Works, and a few others. And we cleared out the area. We understand that people have came back. We are monitoring the situation, and we have resources in place to be able to respond to any unsafe acts, especially acts of violence or major destruction. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Inspector. And with that, we'll open it to questions.
Mayor, you mentioned getting in there, removing the barrier. It seems we have a similar situation happening at 38th in Chicago. Help to maybe compare, obviously, on the scope and the nature of the two areas. But can you talk about any strategy regarding what's happening in Uptown and 38th in Chicago? Obviously, again, it's tough to compare, but I'll let you.
Well, it is tough to compare the situation at Lake and Girard to the situation at 38th in Chicago. I am pleased with the progress that we are making over at 38th in Chicago and the work that has been done in conjunction with those that have occupied space there. And so there are substantial differences, and you need to approach every single one of these scenarios differently. Lake Street is a major commercial corridor. It's a major hub for both traffic and congestion. It's a major hub for business. And we need to make sure that everybody is safe. That has to be a top priority every single step of the way. And the reality is that when you have makeshift barriers that are set up, when you don't have clear delineators as to where you can drive and where you cannot, it risks getting people hurt. We cannot have that. Obviously, there are people that are grieving right now. Winston Smith's family is grieving. We are demanding answers. And simultaneously, we're demanding safety. And that has to be a foremost priority.
How do you avoid the Lake Street situation getting to where 38th and Chicago is right now?
Well, as you can see, we're taking substantial steps right now to make sure that the area is open and accessible. Over the last several days, over the last weeks, our Minneapolis Police Department has prioritized de-escalation in every single interaction that they've had. They've been patient. That being said, the atmosphere has indeed shifted. And with that shift, we need to make sure that the safety of residents in the surrounding community is put at the forefront. And so what that means is that, yes, we will make sure that we're prioritizing First Amendment rights and safety at the same time, which means that to the extent there's criminal activity that is taking place, or to the extent that barricades are being put in the middle of the street that puts both protesters and people at risk of getting hurt, we need to come in, again, try to de-escalate the situation, give a dispersal order, provide people with the opportunity to leave, and if they don't, yes, there will be arrests that will be made.
So when you're talking about a plan for today, and the intersection is again blocked off, you're saying it's being monitored right now. When will you go back to reopen? I mean, is there a plan, a timing plan? You're talking about dispersal orders later for people protesting, but that's not really dealing with the intersection being closed right now.
So the question, I believe, was can you give a time frame as to when the intersection will be open and when the barricades have been removed? The barricades were removed around noon today. They will be removed again. I'm not going to give you a precise time, but we're going to be making sure to work with both our law enforcement partners as well as Public Works to provide an optimal time that is safe for both the neighbors as well as the protesters. These situations are tenuous, they're difficult, and they require proper care along the way. And so, you know, we're not making decisions without fully vetting the assets that we have in place at the time.
Mr. Mayor, will the city be taking any steps to prevent barricades being put back up? Because it seems like you take them down, they go back up, you come back, you take them down, they go back up. So what steps are being there to ensure that that doesn't happen again?
Right, we don't want to get into this scenario where we take down the barricades and then whether it's mattresses or pallets get placed directly back in the street. And so we will be working in conjunction with both our police officers, other jurisdictions, and our Public Works crew to make sure that the area is open and accessible as much as possible. Again, this is a safety concern. We can't have a major commercial corridor like this shut down. We can't have unauthorized closure of our streets, period. People need service. We, as city electeds, as city leaders, we have a job to do, and part of that job is to make sure that basic constituent services are met. That's everything from plowing the snow to cleaning the streets to making sure that potholes are filled to, yes, making sure that people have access to both their homes and businesses.
I guess my question here is, you know, without going too much into your strategy here, will the city do anything to prevent the barricades from going up in the first place?
Yes.
Does that require a longer-term presence there to prevent that from just reoccurring? Because I was there today too, and it was as soon as the police left, they put them back up.
I think the circumstances are obviously quickly changing. The circumstances have changed substantially since last week. I mentioned we've been prioritizing de-escalation all along, yet the atmosphere of the area has substantially shifted in the last couple of days. And so I can't give you a prediction as to the logistics that will be taking place on the ground before they happen. What I can tell you is that we'll be working with our partners to make sure that we're able to respond.
Is this slowing down the process to clear out 38th in Chicago?
We've been making substantial progress over at 38th in Chicago. You know, I'm pleased with the direction that is presently heading right now.
So am I understanding this right, that people will be allowed to protest in the street, but not put barricades in the street as they're doing that?
People are able to protest in general. That we want to be able to protect the rights of people to express their First Amendment freedom of speech. We've seen marches that have been peaceful and safe. We've seen gatherings that have been peaceful and safe. But this ongoing occupation of a street or an intersection in a way that is counter to access and is simply not safe, that's where we have an obligation to step in and say, no, We can't allow for, again, whether it's residents or patrons or people who are protesting to be put in these scenarios that, as we've seen, can be either violent and even deadly.
Is the police department getting many calls from residents who live, I know that area, wow, I was there shortly after Winston Smith was shot. A lot of people live right there. I can't imagine them being too happy again with the access and possible issues with safety. Is the department getting a lot of calls and complaints, the city?
I can't speak to the Minneapolis Police Department as to how many calls that they've gotten at this point. Certainly, our office has gotten a substantial number of calls. I imagine that Councilmember Goodman, who, by the way, is here with us, I failed to mention her earlier, and I assume Council President Lisa Bender has also gotten calls. And so, no, we have an obligation there. Inspector, do you have anything to add that I haven't yet to any of the previous answers that I've already given?
I do not.
If not, that's fine.
Getting a lot of phone calls, and we're trying to work the best we can with the community. They've been
Can you
patient.
step up, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we have been getting a lot of calls from the community and the business community and across the neighborhoods. We've been working with them closely and trying to communicate with a lot of them. They have been extremely patient and understanding and sensitive. It is very difficult for them right now to try to go about with their lives because of what is going on. And so that's why we're trying to come up with this plan that we're having resources ready to respond, because this has turned to more of taking over the streets and unsafe acts going on.
If you could just say there, what kind of pushback have officers been getting?
While they've been out there at
Pushback,
the intersection.
Our officers have been very professional. Anytime we had to respond, especially incidents that were very chaotic, they've stood the line very professionally, tried to talk with people to keep them off the perimeter when we're doing an investigation or if something were to happen. They have been getting swore at, yelled at, and they've been standing the line. So they've been getting a lot of pushback. We understand that when we show up sometimes, this uniform alone can escalate things. That's why we've been doing our best to try to stay back and use the Office of Violence Prevention with peaceful responders that are civilians, and they've been very helpful in this situation. Our own community members and business members have been very helpful in this situation. But now it's time to start kind of moving this along, because people are taking over intersections and it's just so unsafe, as we've seen recently.
I have a question for you. How concerned are you about escalation or confrontation? I saw a couple motorcycles go through there today. Don't know if it was on purpose or not, but it certainly could have been. Are you concerned about that sort of confrontation?
We're always concerned about any kind of confrontations, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So that's why we went in and removed all that stuff today, and that's what our plan is, to eventually, hopefully these peace protesters will go home or stay safe. We ask that if they do go out there, that they stay on the plaza and not take over intersections and create barricades of vehicles, create barricades of our local businesses, items that they use in their own businesses, and we're just trying to keep it peaceful as well. And we're trying to avoid those confrontations.
I've witnessed some of those peacemakers get pushback from demonstrators as well. They're not always welcome there. So if you're telling us you guys are back and you're relying on the peacekeepers from the Office of Violence Prevention and they're getting pushback, who's in control of that specific area right now?
So the Minneapolis Police Department is in control of that specific area, right? And we work with the civilian peace responders to help us. They're another resource that we use, like our regional partners that are coming in to help us.
Maybe the mayor can add to that. You can see why maybe our viewers at home or some of those folks who live in those condos may think that's confusing, because there doesn't seem like much control there right now.
It seems confusing. The situation is confusing, but my message is clearly we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can allow for a peaceful protest. We can demand accountability and transparency. We can memorialize those who have lost their lives. And simultaneously, we can prevent an unauthorized closure or occupation of a street in one of our major commercial hubs. Both of those things can and need to happen at the same time.
One more question?
Councilmember Bender, have you had any communication with community stakeholders down there in Uptown, and what have those been?
Sure, yeah, thanks. So I was able to be out listening to folks who gathered at the memorials and protests a number of evenings. I wasn't able to make it out yesterday, but I have an open invitation to speak with folks who are out demanding change, and I think it's important that we all listen and do what we can. You know, there are a lot of people in our community who want to get involved and who want to help support racial justice. And I think it's all of our responsibility to help bring that forward and to, keep reiterating our city's commitment to keep advocating to the other agencies that are involved in this situation. I've also been talking to a lot of constituents. There are a lot of reactions to what's happening in Uptown. There are a lot of folks who are angry about what happened to Winston Smith. There are a lot of people who, again, in a neighborhood where traffic safety is a huge issue. It is one of the top 3 things that we hear about on a day-to-day basis is speeding traffic, traffic crashes, unsafe streets in Uptown. So there are a lot of people who are horrified by what happened to Deanna and see it as a part of a pattern of unsafe streets in this part of town. And then there are folks who are confused or concerned about protesting. Again, I'm just trying to listen to my constituents, to have conversations. Our community, I think, needs that kind of deep listening and conversation. People have really different opinions, and I think in part with the pandemic and so much isolation, folks tend to be hearing from their own small circles. And we really need as a community to create opportunities for people to hear from each other who have different life experiences, who have a different perspective, so that we can come together and move forward and reach all of these goals. Everyone in our community wants safety. Everyone in our community wants peace. Our community is united in wanting racial justice. So it's, as leaders, figuring out how to bring people together in a common cause toward those goals.
Councilmember, you said it, you've been pushing for transparency alongside the protesters. Is there any city-owned cameras that can help in this investigation? We've seen the impact that video can make in these investigations and for transparency, but still we're not seeing any. And I know this is tough because the city isn't in charge of the investigation. But is there any city-owned cameras that is helping in this investigation to add that transparency?
I can't answer that. I know the BCA is leading this investigation. If others at the city know about city-owned cameras, I don't.
Anybody here that can address that?
No, we don't have to check it.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.